Hey guys, welcome to another video. In this video, I'm going to talk about Red Pill podcasters Fresh and Fit. Now, these two men have the self-proclaimed title of #1 podcast for male self-development. Usually they interview women who are Instagram models or, as they say, workers. And they ask them questions about male and female dating dynamics. Myron Gaines, one of the podcasters, used to be a federal agent, while Walter Weeks, the other person, well, not much is really known about him, except for the fact that he's from the island of Barbados. It's not clearly known how these two ran into each other and became business partners, but this is what they are now. The podcast started around October 26, 2020, and their studio is located somewhere in Miami, Florida, which is where they host their podcast and where they oftentimes meet the people who are the guests for their podcasts, mainly women. Ironically enough, they lambast women, but the kind of women that they could bring or manage to bring on the podcast are just usually low-quality women. But more about that later. The interview styles on the podcast are generally very combative and argumentative, and oftentimes guests end up walking out of the show or even getting violent. In fact, one time in one episode, Myron was holding a gun in one of his shows in order to protect himself from supposedly some people coming on his podcast and attacking him. So not exactly a good look for them. When I see the style of the podcast that they have, my mind goes to some questions. One of the questions is, how is this going to help me personally? Right? But another question is, how is this content going to help men who are struggling in the dating market and life in general, especially when it comes to getting women or getting a girlfriend or a long-term partner? The obvious answer to these questions is, it's not going to help in any way, especially when you watch that podcast long enough, which I must admit I didn't watch it for too long before I quit on it, but I've watched a lot of clips from that podcast, and that's how I'm making this judgment. Such content, not only is it damaging and doesn't help you, but it also warps your view of the opposite gender and of life in general, including yourself. You will have a distorted view of yourself. If we hope to succeed at all when it comes to human relationships, we need to take advice from people who are successful, not from people who are getting their cues from, as Myron and Walter like to call it, low-quality women and quote-unquote 304s. I've no doubt that most of the women who go on that podcast are low quality and are undesirable for marriage and long-term partnerships. We also have to acknowledge the role that Fresh and Fit play when it comes to perpetuating such low-quality women and the cycle of toxicity. And all that ends up with is creating more of the same problem that they complain about, which is ironic, but I'm not sure if they're aware of that. If Fresh and Fit expect to have any sort of credibility when it comes to dating, they need to bring high-quality women on the show and teach men what they look like and how they act. That's the kind of content that will make for more successful and positive relationships, instead of just the combativeness and the argumentation that they complain about, but they instill in other women and show on their podcast. What they do instead is they just make content that's entertaining, that's clickable, and that's attractive to impulsive viewers, to the part of the mind that makes a person impulsively click, generating more drama. So that means they're only worried about money, not necessarily helping other men, especially men who are struggling to find the partner that they're looking for and to be in a relationship with high-quality women, because most of the women on that podcast are not exactly high-quality women. Another giveaway that they don't care about men in general is the fact that they increase the membership that they have for their special content. For example, instead of charging $17 a month, which they used to before, now they charge $35 per month, which maybe it's not that much to some people, but $35 a month for a membership is still a pretty high price. Another egregious example that they have mentioned is the $4,000 that they charge for the meet and greet at a boat party that they're going to have, or that they have already had. But from looking at the photos and videos of that meet and greet, as they like to call it, most people were not meeting and greeting. In fact, most of the women were just sitting on the couches, being on their phones and talking to each other instead of talking to the men that they're supposed to help. This tells me that they don't actually care about improving the men that follow them and that subscribe to them. They just care about exploiting them for their money. Finally, do I recommend taking any dating advice from Fresh and Fit? Definitely not. In fact, I wouldn't even take general life advice from them, much less dating advice. They're not the kind of people that I would want to emulate, and I think any self-respecting person would not want to emulate them either. Therefore, the only way you would want to emulate them is if you want to become like them and become somebody who is just attracted to chaos and is addicted to it, and you feel comfortable with that chaos, which makes me wonder what kind of childhoods they have had in their past, especially in terms of the home, how they grew up with their parents. Were they chaotic? What kind of parents were they? So if you're not going to look at Fresh and Fit for dating advice or life advice in general, I would probably look elsewhere. There are so many other examples that you can look up to when it comes to moral, psychological, spiritual development, and even when it comes to dating that are outside of Fresh and Fit. If you enjoyed this content, make sure to like, subscribe, and comment below. I enjoy reading the comments, especially if they're respectful. Whether they're agreeing with me or disagreeing with me, I always enjoy the dialogue and I look forward to it. Thank you for watching.